Okay, why don't we get started looking at the box office from this past weekend. Total box office was 153 million for the weekend domestically. Only a 1% drop. I think technically it was 0.5% drop. So this is what every movie studio was hoping for with this summer season. Because as we all know, the box office for the whole year has been very, very slow. There have been a few big hits, but none of them have been super, super big mega hits the way Hollywood was used to, like 10 or even 5 years ago. So it's really reassuring to see a $153 million weekend coming off of an equally large weekend. So looking at what opened, we have at number 2, A Quiet Place, day 1 at 53 million for its opening weekend. I had projected this to be 36 to 41 million, so this definitely exceeded my expectations. Maybe I'm not good at the projections. Maybe I should just listen to other people's stuff trying to make up my own projections. This was made off of a $67 million budget, and so far it's made about 99 million worldwide. So it's definitely, it's kind of gotten a good start. It'll be interesting to see how well it holds in the coming weeks and weekends, I should say. But this seems to be on par with the other Quiet Place films, which also opened in like the high 40s, low 50s. So, again, not a huge blockbuster success by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely something that shows that there's still some vitality to the Quiet Place brand. Also opening this week at number 3, we have the first chapter of Kevin Costner's epic Western saga, Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 1, only bringing in about 11 million, which is definitely disappointing if you're Kevin Costner. I had projected it at bringing in about 15 to 19 million, so this definitely didn't even, and that was already a low bar. Right? For a film like this, it's like a $50 to $100 million budget. You want to see it make some pretty big numbers in that first weekend. I've also heard it's not that great, right? So I don't even think this is going to be an example of it, doing kind of okay at the start and then kind of holding out for a long time. I would be shocked if this is still in the top 5 next weekend, if not. No, I don't want to say it's not going to be in the top 10, but there's a good chance that it just doesn't last. But maybe it will though, because it'll be like 4th of July weekend, and this is like a dad movie. This is like the epitome of like a movie that middle-aged men are gonna go because they like Kevin Costner and they like westerns, and they'll just go and then they'll like it fine. So that's definitely disappointing if you're Kevin Costner or anyone who's associated with this. I believe he self-financed this. So this isn't just like, oh, it kind of sucks for Kevin Costner because he's like the star. Like he is the director, like he financed the whole thing, so a little disappointing. It's also especially interesting in the top 10 this week. We have like 2 Bollywood movies. So at number 5 we have Kalki 2898 AD, bringing in 5.5 million. This had a pretty big budget of like 72 million, but it was like hugely successful in India. I wasn't able to get like the exact numbers, but I believe it set like all these box office records in India. So that's interesting that I was able to crack the top 10 here in the United States. Also, it looks like there's a film, number 9, Jat and Juliet 3. So I think it's, the third in a trilogy, bringing in about 1.5 million. So again, it's interesting to see what ends up kind of just squeaking in. And of course, I don't think these will stay in for much longer after this first week. Looking at stuff continuing here, we have Inside Out 2 holding on to its number 1 spot, bringing in 57 million. It's held its first place spot now in its 3rd weekend, only having a 43% drop. So again, definitely good to see if you, basically you ideally you always want to see less than 50% drop weekend to weekend. You're always gonna have like a huge drop from the first to second. And this one, if my memory is correct, did not have a huge drop. And then this is also, I think it started at 150 and then about 100, went down to 100, and now it's down to about 50, 60 million for the weekend. This brings its domestic total up to 469 million, and worldwide crossing the $1 billion mark. The first movie in 2024 to do that, for worldwide gross $1.01 billion. So just barely squeaking past $1 billion. So this has been an unmitigated success for Pixar and Disney. I've talked about this at length on this show, but it's going to be disappointing because Hollywood always takes the wrong lessons from every success and every failure. So what is the lesson going to be here? Forget more interesting, personal, unique and original ideas. We're just going to lean on what's worked in the past. But financially, it was a good return on investment because it only had it had a $200 million budget. So it's not only made back its budget, but it's, again, been very lucrative. And again, it's only been in theaters for 3 weeks. So, really 2 weeks, 3 weekends. So, the sky's the limit on, this could keep growing and growing and growing. Also continuing, we have, at number 6, The Bike Riders in its second weekend now, bringing in just a small $3.3 million. We're talking about having a big drop. It didn't really even open that big to begin with. It was kind of fell below projections. This has now had a 66% drop. I've heard it's good, but not great. And for a film like this, that's more of on the indie side, you need it to be great for people to really care about it. This brings its total to domestically to about 16 million and its worldwide total to about 24 million. But this is all off of a $30-40 million budget. So this is going to be concerning in terms of being able to make back its money. I think I remembered it was originally going to be released by 20th Century Studios, 20th Century Searchlight, whatever it's called now, Searchlight Pictures. Basically the independent arm of 20th Century Fox that was, subsumed by Disney when they bought it. And I think they ditched it. And I remember that was a big story at the time, and then it got picked up by a different distributor. But maybe Disney saw something, or they were able to read the tea leaves in a sense. Also in its second weekend here, we have in the top 10, it kind of just actually making it into the top 10 is Kinds of Kindness, which is the Yorgos Lanthimos film. He's the director of Killing of a Sacred Deer and Poor Things and The Favorite and The Lobster, all these incredible, really quirky, off the beaten path kind of movies. This opened last weekend, but it went from being in 5 theaters to 490 theaters, so this was a 298% jump. So it actually jumped from 13th place to now just barely squeaking into the top 10. But again, this is not a movie that is expected to make a lot of money, and I feel like the marketing for this has been piss poor, especially since Poor Things swept a lot of the categories at the Oscars. So far, it's only made about $2 million domestically and $3 million worldwide off of just a $15 million budget, right? So it's, again, films like this aren't meant to be huge money makers, but you want to at least make back your budget, right? I don't know. Also continuing, we have, is still in the top 5, Bad Boys Ride or Die, the 4th Bad Boys film, fittingly at number 4, bringing in about 10 million for the weekend. It dropped from 2nd to 4th place, now in its 4th frame, so it's been in theaters for about a month now. Only a 45% drop, so this is another one that's been fairly successful, all things considered. This brings its domestic total to about 165 million and 332 million worldwide off of just a $100 million budget. So it's definitely made back its budget. This has definitely been a not a huge gangbusters box office victory by any stretch of the imagination, but this, again, is, I think, a much more sustainable goal for movie studios, are films that just consistently do pretty well and they make way more than their budget. There is a sizable profit. It's just not $800 million worth of profit, Also continuing, just want to make a note here, we have at number 7 and number 8, 2 films that have been in the top 10 for way over a month, and one of them even basically about 2 months. Number 7, we have the Garfield movie, still in the top 10, and number 7, $2 million for the weekend, dropping from 5th to 7th in its 6th frame. Again, only about a 47% drop. And off of just a $60 million budget, it's now brought in $90 million domestically, $240 million worldwide. So the worldwide gross is basically 4 times its budget. So again, this is one of those things that is Hollywood going to take the wrong lessons? Probably. And the lesson's going to be, we should make more animated films based off of iconic cartoon properties. And then at number 8, we have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, still in the top 10, bringing just a very humble 1.7 million. Huge drop, though, in terms of the ranking. It dropped from 4th to 8th. But it's 8th frame, so the fact that it was in the top 5 for so long, I think is commendable. A slightly bigger drop than you would like to see, a 55% drop, but again, this makes sense. It's so far into its run at this point. By modern standards, at least. That's not super surprising or super alarming. This brings its total domestically to 168 million, and its worldwide total to 389 million off of just a $160 million budget. So again, this has definitely been an interesting summer box office season. A lot of movies that we thought would do really well kind of floundered. Films that we weren't sure if they would do well did really well. And then there's all these other films that we thought would do well, and then they did well, right? They're not, again, these huge, like, once in a generation box office phenomenons, but these are consistent moneymakers. Hopefully, one of the right lessons studios can take is, to be okay with a film slowly building its box office returns. Quickly, just want to plug, not even plug, but just note, we have a couple films that were in the top 10 that have now dropped out. We have this week at number 11, If, the John Krasinski Imaginary Friends movie. It dropped from 6th place to 11th place, and it spent 6 weeks in the top 10. The other 2 movies I'm going to mention were only in the top 10 for 1 week. That was Thelma, which is now at number 12. It dropped from 8th. And then The Exorcism, which dropped from 7th place to now 18th place. Again, they only spent 1 week in the top 10, which makes a lot of sense considering that, they're smaller. Thelma is small, and The Exorcism is just, from what I hear, not very good. Looking at the comments here, Vivian Metzger writes, I definitely want to see A Quiet Place 3. I loved the first 2, just such amazing sound design. Yeah, that's like one of the best things about those movies is like the fact that because of the conceit, you really have to lean on like visual storytelling. Though not to but this is technically like a prequel. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is interesting because, again, it's not following any of the characters we know. I think that there's like a few characters that show up that we're familiar with, but again, it's more like side characters. But notably, like the original films are post-apocalyptic. This film is apocalyptic, right? It's covering the beginning of this, and there's like a different kind of way that the characters within the story are going to react to that, right? Because like they're learning the rules, whereas like John Krasinski and Emily Blunt and their family, like they already know the rules, right? So I'm curious I was very surprised to see it do so well and kind of match those original films. But it'll be interesting to see. I've heard like it's fine. So it'll be interesting to see if, people find it interesting and worth going to see.